All right, so welcome everyone to our first lunchtime session of the Green Party Live, which we're trying to host every other Wednesday, either in the afternoon or in the evenings. And we are gathering friends, members, supporters for conversation with elected Greens, activists, authors like Tansy, academics, business people, NGO leaders, and change makers of all kind to explore how collaboration, integration, and participation in our democracy hold the keys to delivering the urgent systems change required to deliver environmental, social, and economic justice for all. As Greens, we value conversation, dialogue, and debate, much of it which can be sometimes difficult, because we know that the solutions to the problems of the day won't be discovered and delivered through rhetoric and sound bites. We know that better is possible, but how can we make better happen? At the Green Party, we are trying to make better possible by building common ground, not battlegrounds, by turning activism in our streets into legislation in our parliaments, by building an economy that serves our environment and our well-being, finding solutions to the problems that we face through the communities who face them. And when we see our homes, health, and work as green issues, better as possible, let's build it together. So this afternoon and over the next 2 months, we will be delving into 3 different themes. One is systems change, so looking at social and environmental justice as indivisible. It's not a message that fits into a soundbite, but we will lead by not reinforcing siloed issues and engaging instead people in conversations to reveal the truth about how solutions to our crises are interdependent. The second is collaboration over competition. If everything is connected, then we must embrace our shared values and find ways to work together. And the third is participatory democracy. So a flourishing democracy requires citizens to have access to robust and truthful information, to engage in debate during election and beyond, and to get out and vote and be empowered by national government with the information, skills, legal framework, and resources required to create customized local solutions. So this afternoon's event is going to be discussing how fashion, which is one of the top 10 most pollutive industries in the world, can be reshaped. We know that within this industry, social and environmental justice are indivisible, as well as every other industry in the world. And we are trying to bring together people who are able to look at this issue as an interconnected issue. So we're joined by change makers today, and I'll let each of the panelists introduce themselves. We'll start with Tansy and then Amelia. Tansy, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, hi, thank you, Holly. It's great to be here having this really, really important conversation. So my name is Tansy Hoskins, and I'm the author of Stitched Up, the Anti-Capitalist Book of Fashion, and more recently, Footwork, What Your Shoes Are Doing to the World.
Thank you. And Amelia, do you want to introduce yourself? I know most people will know who you are here.
I'm Amelia Womack, Deputy Leader of the Green Party, and think that fashion is a vitally important issue to be talking about in terms of all the different aspects it incorporates, which is something we'll be talking about throughout this event. So I'm really looking forward to it, and really looking forward to being on a panel with Tansy as well.
Thanks, Amelia. And before we get started, there's a few terms that are not sort of common language, so we wanted to just quickly explain them. I don't know, Amelia, do you want to explain what agroecology is and kind of how it relates to Green Party policy?
Yeah, so basically we're talking about agricultural crops. Sorry, I've got childcare today, so you might hear voices in the background. It's basically agricultural crops and how they link into the environment, how different things work together in our systems. We know that in ecology, things can't be separated. And in terms of how we work as a party, we always look at those interconnected aspects. So it's how our natural systems interact with each other, that's plants, animals, humans, and making sure that we are looking at that in an entirely holistic way.
Awesome, thank you. And I was going to get Nisanth to explain what regenerative, degenerative, and bioregional is, but since he's not here yet, regenerative creates environments all life can thrive with dignity in, so that's human beings and non-human beings as well. Degenerative is the system that we live in now, which takes and gives nothing back in return. And then bioregional is a region defined by characteristics of its natural environment rather than man-made things like borders. So if you hear those words come up, that's what they mean. So we're going to kind of jump right into the questions. Tansy, we were going to start with you. We Greens aim to transition our economy into one that promotes a dignified life for everyone and regeneration for the environment upon which we all depend. What does that mean to you in relationship to the work that you do and the issues in the fashion industry?
Well, it means, I mean, yes, it means everything. Once you, I think of the fashion industry as like a beautiful cake. So on the outside, you know, it looks absolutely perfect, you know, beautiful icing, beautiful candles, beautiful pearls around it. But then the minute you cut into that cake, you know, out starts oozing, you know, that the blood of garment workers, the polluted soil of the cotton fields, the destroyed rivers that are full of chemicals, the oil that goes into making clothes as well. So yeah, so inside the cake, it's a horrible mess. Recently, there's been a bit of attention about the Aral Sea. So this is in Central Asia. This is an entire sea which has been dried up and destroyed due to the world's thirst for cotton. Another thing that, you know, that I've been looking at recently when I've been researching shoes is that cattle farming is the #1 cause of deforestation of the Amazon rainforest, and approximately 50% of everything that we make from leather is shoes. So the shoes on each of our feet are intimately tied to the destruction in Brazil. And then, of course, you know, that you can't separate the impact on the environment without looking at the impact on the human beings who are in these supply chains as well. So, for example, if you are a tannery worker, if you're a leather worker in Bangladesh, you've been found to have a 90% chance of being dead by the age of 50. So, you know, the callous treatment of the planet, of course, extends and it, you know, intensely impacts human beings as well. And I've just published an article with The Guardian this week on the treatment of garment workers in Myanmar, which I think it's fair to say is the worst place to be a garment worker in Southeast Asia. And we are seeing thousands of mostly young women, you know, fired, put in prison, like shackled together in prison, and arrested and intimidated, all for just trying to stand up for themselves and for their rights. So it's a two-pronged issue with fashion. Like everything bad that happens is happening in the fashion industry.
That's incredibly true. And it's too bad Nisanth is not here as well, because one of the things that his project does is completely change the fashion industry by sort of flipping it on its head and giving farmers and creators the power to make decisions about their own lives and not have that coming from the top from brands and from westernized countries. But hopefully he'll show up and we can go back through his questions. Amelia, is there a story from your years of working as a politician that inspires you and keeps you going in relation to reworking and reshaping the fashion industry? One that you've seen that addresses both the social and environmental justice issues that have needed to be regenerated to work for people in place?
So I've been doing this work as deputy leader for 6 years now. And what I've seen is a change of conversation around everything around the environment, but much as Tansy says, the fashion industry is a gateway to so many of those topics. And the learning and education that people have had of understanding about pollution as a result of dyes in their clothes, carbon emissions as a result of their production. And you talk about the Aral Sea and the Colorado River in America no longer reaches the sea at specific points of the year as a result of cotton production. Cotton's such a thirsty crop that it absorbs so much that it just influences our environment and ecology. And I think the more these conversations take place as a result of the work of so many people, it becomes a gateway to a much wider understanding of the impact of our lives. I mean, it's as commonplace as we all have clothes on our back. We can all relate to clothing. We can all relate to fashion because they are part of our everyday lives. But understanding that our actions and the way that we consume and the way that we understand how we consume has such a vast impact is really vital vital to make sure that we change the very systems in place that makes fast fashion quite specifically possible. And I think that fashion is just in itself, at this time when we see creativity and the arts being trampled on by our government, I think it's really important that we do celebrate things that enable us to express ourselves and is about creativity as well. And fashion is one of those areas. It should be about art. It is art and creative, but now it's become something so much more vicious. I mean, you could even touch on the kind of impacts of women's body image, as well as the fact that there are millions of children that are working in the garment industry, young girls basically trapped in this work for a lifetime, realistically, as a result of the lack of options of education that they have. And I think that there's all of these different aspects really pull together what we talk about when we say that social justice and environmental justice are interlinked. They're interlinked in every aspect of our life, including the very items we wear.
Perfectly put. Tansy, a similar sort of question for you. There's often tensions within solution building and competing priorities when it comes to the environmental, climate, and social justice crises that people are facing right now, and the climate which all of us depend on. We need urgent action, but often that urgent action requires a mindset change, which is something that seems to take more time than we have. How do we reconcile these two things, and what have your books tried to make clear to folks in terms of educating people?
Yeah, I mean, I think like this is a really key question. I mean, I think one of the things that's really important is to get people to see themselves as linked to the entire supply chain of a piece of clothing, and not just the very end bit, like the purchasing bit. And I think particularly at a time like this, when when COVID is making life so much harder, I think we need to recognize that we have so much more in common with with the workers in the Bangladeshi factories than we do with the CEOs of brands in the US and UK, and that we need to be making links with workers' organizations over there as well. And this, fashion is a consumer product. So people, when they first start thinking about these things, they first start sort of thinking like, oh, like, how can I change like myself? Because fashion is so personal. So the first thing that sort of people start to think about is like, how do I change my own wardrobe? And I think, as Amelia was saying, like this is about changing the entire world. Fashion is known as capitalism's favorite child, like for a very good reason. And so you have to get quite deep into political issues. We have to talk about the gendered nature of the fashion industry and the racialized nature of the exploitation that's going on, and the fact that this is very real and it's happening now. And last time I was in Bangladesh, interviewing people who had become climate refugees, from rising sea levels or melting mountain water. And so it's the fact, people who are working in factories are kind of hit twice. So they're hit by the horrible labor conditions, and they're hit by the climate impact as well. And so I think we just need to make more global links and sort of think of every point of the supply chain. But I think in a positive sense, we do live in a time where people care more than ever before about what they're wearing, like what they put on their bodies and what they put on their feet as well. So I think this is a good moment for change, and COVID offers us that. It offers us a crossroad. Do we want to go back to how things were, or do we want to think about what is essential, like what do we need, and how do we make that happen? So this, it's an important time at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that a lot of the times with the issues in the fashion industry, they have a lot to do with the issues with food sovereignty as well, and the two are interlinked, as all the ingredients sort of stem from that space. So some of the work that Amelia is going to talk about, that Natalie and Jenny have been doing in the House of Lords, and there's all these sort of links that sort of take us all the way from the soil all the way to, the shopping centers that we now have. Tansy, I'm going to go back to you again since Nisanthe is not here. How do we gather likely and unlikely allies to work together in the fashion industry? Do you have any examples from your years of experiences of what an unlikely alliance might be, maybe imagined, or even better if it's a real experience?
Yeah, I mean, so the fashion industry can be a very dark place, but it by no means is it all doom and gloom. And I think if people do present it as kind of hopeless, then what they're mostly doing is silencing and ignoring the voices of people who are fighting every single day in the fashion industry, and in particular, the garment workers themselves. So the young women, that I've been interviewing in Myanmar, who have literally been imprisoned for trying to get safer conditions in their factories during COVID-19. And so even recently there have been some successes. There's a factory in Romania where the workers were paid just 50% of their wages for August, and the workers got together and they had some international support from international NGOs, and now they've been paid their full wages. And in terms of international coalitions, a couple of years ago, Nike became the center of a big campaign by the United Students Against Sweatshop organization in the USA, they're like a big kind of anti-sweatshop group in loads of different universities over there. And Nike had said that it was going to expel the workers' rights consortiums from all of its factories and not let them go and inspect them anymore. And USAS weren't having any of this, and so they mounted a big campaign in defense of the garment workers and in defense of transparency and factory standards. And they brought trade union leaders over to America and did big campus tours and boycotts and threatened Nike. And eventually, after I believe it was about 2 years, Nike caved in and allowed the Workers' Rights Consortium to go back and properly inspect the factory. So if you get that kind of work, that kind of real international solidarity work, so the workers in the factories, people, environmental defenders on the front line, and then people in countries like the UK where we have the shops, we have the right to go and have a demonstration outside the shops. Those are quite powerful. And we have journalists and campaigners and people who want to get involved. These are powerful alliances, because you have to remember, like a brand is an idea, and brands are just terrified of having that idea disrupted. They want to be associated with athleticism or glamour or something. They don't want the reality exposed, the reality of sweatshops or drastic pollution or and so on. So yeah, it is doable. It's very, very doable to affect change in the fashion industry.
Thanks. It's nice to have a hopeful message alongside all the worrying ones we share. Amelia, what has democracy got to do with fashion, sort of beyond voting? How do we empower people, or how do people empower themselves to use democratic right to start creating and implementing solutions for themselves and for their farming and creative communities who are impacted from the soil to sow culture of fashion?
I think it really is important to talk about politics and voting first and foremost, because let's remember that those people that we vote into our institutions are the people that create the framework within which business and farmers and all of these kind of operations work. It gives us tax, it's the people who tax what's bad or give us additional benefits to what's good. And I think that when I travel the country and speak to people, all people want is the greenest option to be the cheapest and easiest option. And it's only through ensuring that we are using our political power, our elected representatives use their political power, that we're able to achieve that. But I think that we always must remember our own power. I say this time and time again. it is you, all of these elected representatives work for you. Even all of these kind of different businesses, it is you that should always have the power, and you always have the power to speak out, whether that's voting, or whether that's speaking out on social media, or whether that's petitioning or lobbying or demonstrating, or as Tansy said, being outside a shop and raising awareness and exposing companies for who they are. I mean, talking about this idea of the brand, let's not forget that there's a class issue here, even in the UK, that Burberry recently burnt £30 million worth of clothes so that it wouldn't cheapen its brand by it being available elsewhere, which essentially means accessible to people like you and me, that we would cheapen a brand because we shouldn't have that kind of money to be able to afford it. But all of this power that we have, I say it time and time again, and I say it time and time again because I want people to remember it. I always see political campaigning a bit like those 2p machines that you get at amusement arcades. You put your 2p in the top and it tumbles down, and your small action shifts the entire machine. And maybe you win and maybe you don't. Maybe it's the next person who comes along that makes that big win, but your small action has made change happen. People often talk about the things that we can do individually. I mean, today I'm wearing the clothes that I buy from charity shops because that's what I always prioritize. I think we really need to reimagine how our fashion industry works. But those individual actions are great, but I think it's that system change that is really essential. And what can we imagine? I mean, in other goods and industries, we've talked about a repair economy and a redesign economy in a much bigger way, a reuse economy in a much bigger way than we have within the fashion industry. We've gone from a generation of people who have make, do and mend, where people had the skills and opportunities to make clothes last longer. We don't think about repair in the same way that we do. We're now kind of institutionalized into this idea that we should be buying new clothes every few months to match new fashions, or buying new clothes every few months because the quality is so poor that we simply have no other opportunities. This is a broken system. This is a system that's causing environmental destruction and means that the lives of people all around the world, as Tansy described, are being oppressed as a result of these big businesses, and people are simply not having the opportunities that they should have, or being respected for the skills that they have. So those small actions can make a system change happen. And I think just keep remembering our own power at every opportunity. I really hate that phrase that was very fashionable a few years ago, the keep calm and carry on phrase. We saw it everywhere. And it frustrated me because there was so much happening, and there is so much happening, where I just think, get angry and get organized. And I think that if we can, in every single issue, the more that we organize, like those workers that we just heard, with solidarity that we can give to people, means that we can use our own power to make change happen.
Thanks, Amelia. And it looks like Nisanth is almost here. Hey, Nisanth, can you hear us? Sorry, everyone. He wasn't able to join earlier. Can you hear us, Nisanth? Hi. Let me ask you to unmute. Well, I'll ask Tansy another question while Nisanth is getting hooked up. The Green Party is always looking to reflect and grow and change. Are there things that you think the Green Party of England and Wales can do to support the transition of fashion from hierarchical and degenerative to circular and regenerative?
Yes, I mean, I think one thing that it would be like really good. I mean, I know it's difficult to tell the Green Party exactly what to do, but I think this idea of like centering like voices from the global south, and in particular centering the voices of trade unionists and workers' organizations from countries like Bangladesh, India and Myanmar is incredibly important. And this idea of international solidarity. So, you know, when trade union leaders get put in prison, you know, that we are outside the Bangladeshi embassy or the Myanmar embassy and registering our displeasure and our anger at these human rights abuses. I think that is really important. It's about showing up for people, I think, at the end of the day. And workers are the heart of the fashion industry, and if we could actually have some kind of democracy within the fashion industry, and I think it's important to make it really clear that at the moment, like, there is no democracy in the fashion industry. There is a total monopolized power at the top of the industry by a very small cabal of people, predominantly American and European shareholders, some of the richest people on the entire planet. So, the man who owns Zara, the man who owns Louis Vuitton, the man who owns H&M, like, these are the richest people in the world, and they have a concentration of all of the power and all of the money in the fashion industry. And then at the other end of the fashion industry, you have about 60 million people, predominantly young women, who aren't even allowed to have trade unions, so aren't even allowed to have a small collective voice or any kind of democratic say about what is happening in the fashion industry. So, if we could have a little evening out of the democracy, or a total evening out of democracy, I personally think that this would help solve a lot of the environmental problems. Because if people did have a voice in those factories, then they wouldn't vote to do the kind of days that they do, or do the kind of hours that they do, or work with the chemicals that they do. So you would immediately start to slash this problem of massive overproduction, which is taking such a toll on our planet. So democracy is at the heart of this entire issue, and for me that starts with with worker representation in the factories, and our bit of that, I think, is pushing and supporting those workers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's as you said earlier as well, the fashion industry is a representation of the issues with capitalism and the lack of democracy that we have as a whole, where power needs to be devolved to the communities who are facing the issues, and the decisions need to be made by communities themselves rather than by some all-seeing power. Nisanth, are you with us?
Yeah, I am with you. I'm so sorry, first of all, because I had a completely wrong time on my calendar, maybe due to like the time difference or something, and I just realized, like, whoa, I'm so late to this thing, but I'm so sorry.
We're happy to have you, and thank you for making the time for us. So I'm going to just back up some of the questions. Sorry to the audience. We had them sort of thematic, but we'll ask Nisanth all his questions in one go. So one of the ones we really wanted to start with, and sort of where we've ended up in our conversation now, is talking about for centuries, British imperialism and capitalism as a whole has imbalanced life for people around the world, and in India as well, where you are now, imposing these sort of degenerative farming practices and degenerative relationships and working conditions. How does the work of Oshadi change this system?
I was talking to my friend this morning just about not exactly about the degenerative farming system, but as a holistic, like the entire system is based around this colonialism, where you could see, so many artisans from India, like so many farmers from India, they work so hard, they have impeccable skills. But when a brand like works with an artisan community or a farming community, they take it back and they claim it's theirs, or and what we always stood for as a brand ourselves was to get the right recognition to artisans, to us, because every time we partner with a brand, we called it a partnership. And we didn't really want to fall into this limelight of someone supporting someone, or someone helping. Not a charity. It's not a charity. You know what I mean? Like, people are really skilled here. They just they don't have a platform, and perhaps they haven't grown because of that. And if there are like tweed making places in UK, like Harris Tweed, or these places, and when you talk about Harris Tweed, you talk about like tweeds for Chanel, or these beautiful craftsmanship, or these clothing. When you talk about a fabric from India made by like an artisan here, like people talk about oh, let's, help these guys to grow, or like, they are pictured in such a different limelight, like, they don't have shirts. So subconsciously people start registering in their brain that, hey, these are poor people. And I think that mindset needs to change. And that's what we stood for. Like, we really wanted to bring limelight to the skills than like the social conditions of these places, because that's when the true partnership can come in. And like, that's when the relationship becomes reciprocal. So, you give something back, you take it back. It's not like the brands are coming and like they're paying someone and, like they're helping it. They get like impeccable fabrics in return, and, which is driving their brands to earn like millions and millions of dollars every year, like so many embroidery companies. Or like even with the farm, like if you look at it, imperialism, like, it's just not like this kind of system is not just like from Western side of the world to India, but it's within India itself. So if you see like the big factories in India, like, they control this farming community. They decide what the price of the farm, the price of the cotton is going to be. They don't think about like, hey, is the farm has the farm been affected by, let's say, drought or like flood, or, was there like a pest attack or like something, why do we judge the price of a cotton based, like, why is there a universal commodity price of cotton when the environmental conditions, the social conditions of growing the cotton are completely different? Like, we probably had floods here last year, and like someone in central India was growing beautiful cotton. So you can't compare the prices of like cotton from here to there. So we are backward integrating sort of the supply chain, where like, we don't give like a rate code of what the price of the fabric is, but we figure out like, we work with brand partners, we get them to commit from the farming side of things. So if things go wrong, the burden's on everyone. It's on the brand, it's on the spinners, it's on the weavers, it's on the farmers. It doesn't fall on the farmers like, complete, like currently the burden of the current system is on farmers' head. Like if something goes wrong, the value of the cotton goes down. And like that's why, hence why there's like the highest suicide rates you see in India of farmers. It's because of that kind of mentality and system where you want to make everything universal. And like, you can have like, it doesn't work like even like prices, like, dollar or like pound is not same price as Indian currency. So the reason, because of why it's that, is there are so many factors, like economic factors, which affect the rates of the. It's very similar. I think these kind of things like cotton or like vegetables or like anything that a farmer grows has to be looked at in a very similar way. Like the economic situations of like farmers, like there was lockdown last year and you're still able to buy the cotton at the same price as you would buy like a year ago. Like what does that justify? 1 year, like 6 months of no work, and the price of the cotton is still the same. It should be twice or maybe 3 times higher. Like a person shouldn't be able to buy a dress for the same price as he would have bought it like 1 year ago. You see what I mean? Like it's
everything
yeah.
on its head. What do you, so I know that you have been working with Fibershed, which exists here in the UK, and who one of our guests is going to be in the next version of this. But how has this Fibershed model, or really what's an ancient Indian, farming practices and creation practices, how has this shifted the industry for the people that you're working with as part of the collective that you have helped create?
The first thing, like, what we try to do with what we do is like, we create independence. Like, we are trying to create a system where we are not giving fishes to the artisans or farmers, but we are teaching them how to fish. So even if when we are not around for like 3 years or something, after 3 years of time or 5 years of time, they still become independent enough to survive and work with other places. They're not reliant on us. Second thing is like, all the people who work with us are paid at least like twice or 3 times the living wage. It's not because like that's the basic salary, but we have a partnership with the artisans as well. So when we earn, like, let's say an income, we divide it into like 3 ratio. One is for like the artisans, the second portion of the income is for the company, and the third portion of is like the profit. So I don't think a lot of brands or companies work in that way. They have like a salary, a minimum wage. So no matter like an artisan's working for 12 hours, like he still gets paid the same, or maybe like a little bit more. But the artisans who work with us, they get at least like 5 times more income than they do normally. The farmers, like, we started working with farmers on a contract basis. So back in the day, it was like, hey, this is the salary, this is what you get. But like with the farmers now, it's on a contract basis. So, you know, if they work more, so we figure out a rate which is more than a living wage as a base rate. But if they work more, they probably get like twice the living wage or 3 times the living wage. So, you know, like we are also in early stages of figuring things out. We don't have a set model. We are making some mistakes, but you know, when we learn from them and we grow that way. And I think that's where like the fiber shed comes in, fiber shed and ancient Indian model. If you see the like the rural ancient rural like economy model of India is very similar to what fiber shed is. Like, you know, they both have very, like I learn a lot from like fiber shed, but then I learn a lot like similarly with like when I look into the rural economy of India. Back in the day, like things were completely like focused in a village where there was a farm, there was a spinner next to the farm, there was a weaver next to the farm. So everything that was made, like, you know, within that supply chain was sold in and around that place. But of course, like you were like when the British came in, they started importing this exporting these handmade fabrics to Manchester, and like they were importing machine-made fabrics from Manchester back to India. So it completely like, you know, disrupted the supply chain, not in a good way. So, you know, we are trying to bring back that kind of model, but it is like, it's going to take some time. You see people like want clothes like every single day, they want 5 pieces. And it comes down to consumer like changing their mind and, you know, saying that, hey, one dress is fine. You can wear it like 5 times, you know, like it's fine. It's okay. Like it's, you know, and that's why you create like this kind of dresses. Like our focus is also on quality. So a lot of the ancient like cotton was short staple cotton. And the thing with short staple cotton is like the dresses don't last like long, you know, like you can't like, you know, they would last for like maybe 20 washes or 30 washes, but then it starts wearing off. So we started working with like higher quality, like native varieties of cotton where, you know, it's long staple. People can wear it maybe 100 times or, you know, 10 times or like whatever it is, but way more than what they would do with like a traditional short staple cotton. So that way we are trying to promote like this an alternative way of this fiber shed. It's not something new. It's just looking back into the old and, you know, learning from that and making it relevant for the current times.
Perfectly put, thank you. So we have a bunch of questions from the audience that I'll open up to, all of you can comment on them equally if you feel inspired. So the first one is from Hannah Griffin, and she says, could you please talk a bit more about greenwashing in fashion, such as bamboo, which can be treated with terrible chemicals and fabrics made from wood pulp that are and claims by big brands with labels such as conscious but not verified by external bodies such as the Fair Trade Foundation, etc. Does anybody want to take that one?
With bamboo, like I think when it comes to like materials, anything you do monotonously in a monocropping way is unsustainable. Like, you know, if people were to like buy the most sustainable fabric in a really like, you know, really fast way, that would end up becoming like a you know, unsustainable fiber. You see what I mean? Like it's with bamboo or even from like a really sustainable fiber called tencel. If let's say people are growing like millions and millions of hectares of, you know, like eucalyptus plants to extract tencel out of it, it's the same thing with like the oil. If you see like the palm oil which you get in like Malaysia, it completely like destroyed all the forests because, you know, it was like a cheap oil. It was like, you know, so easy to get, so everyone started investing in that, and now the forests are gone because so that kind of started putting like this kind of monocropping system. Anything that grows within that monocropping system is bad. And it could be cotton as well. Like if we were to farm cotton like monotonously, which is being done now, even like organic cotton, like if you farm organically like millions and millions and hectares of cotton, like it's still inorganic. And like coming to like the chemical side of things, you could treat cotton with like chemicals very similar way you would treat like bamboo with. And, you know, it's like figuring out like, you know, the system of everything done consciously, like buying, selling. It needs to be like a complete package where every single one, including every single like, you know, person, including the consumer, they need to have like a different perspective on things, on, you know, buying, on selling, on spinning, on weaving, because it's all interlinked, you see.
Yeah.
But that's my thoughts on that.
Thanks, Tansy. Do you want to comment on this one as well?
Yes, I mean the fashion industry has a very serious problem with greenwashing, which is it's a reflection of two things. So first of all, like there is a real desire from people for more ethically made and more sustainable products, and so this is why these are brought out. The other thing is that they're brought out as a distraction. So so that brands are able to point to them to their one sort of capsule wardrobe of organic cotton or whatever, in order to disguise, the billions of completely unsustainable bits of clothing that are being brought out. And I think a lot of this distraction comes down to brands knowing that their time is almost up. And wanting to present themselves as being part of the solution, when in fact anyone who is working in the fashion industry knows that they are the problem. And that, in fact, what we need is a global legislative framework which holds them to account for their environmental and labour practices crimes. And so these are, these product lines are a flimsy like veil to try and cover up what is going on. And I think it's important not to fall for it, and to keep pushing them on what they are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tan.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Nisant.
Yeah, I think like greenwashing, the only way it could be solved is bringing in like technology, like, like monitoring things being monitored by, it should be a right amalgamation of like ancient techniques, but, it needs like modern technology to monitor stuff. Because if you leave things to like humans, a lot of the times, like what happens is, they distort the information. I think it has to be like, to be absolutely right, absolutely perfect, it has to be done by like a machine, because that's where like machine can start supporting like human being. It shouldn't like control, but it supports to bring out transparency or traceability. And let's say like I was reading about this new thing where you could leave this like fiber trace inside like a cotton, and that you have an app where you could trace like the cotton's now become a yarn, and now it's become like a woven fabric, and now it's in dresses, and now it's on the way like to London, being delivered to Holly Rose or something, you know what I mean? So it's got a
FMG or MFG. Isn't that one of the
yeah,
brands?
yeah. Sorry?
Isn't one of the brands that takes your cotton is Story MFG from Brighton here in England?
Yeah, this is a t-shirt from Story MFG.
Nice.
It's dyed by jackfruit seeds, and they make really beautiful clothes. But yeah, we work with Story MFG in London, and some other brands around the world. But I think like if there was a system, if someone could create a system like this fiber trace, everything can be transparent. Like, people don't have to rely on certifications like fair trade or COTS, or like, you don't need like a stamp to say you're good. You just like, you can do your work. The traceability link online can say like, hey, this is what's done. This is how much it was like someone was paid. I think Provenance, like a company like Provenance, like are really close to getting there, but it still has like a verification thing by humans done on it. And until or unless it becomes completely like digitalized or online and stuff, it's really hard to
track everything.
To track everything, like with trust and honesty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the next question is from Patrick Ellen. He says, or they say, how do we challenge fast fashion? How do we get low-paid workers in the global north to care about supply chains of their clothes? I always feel conflicted when it comes to children's clothing, especially as fast fashion offers an affordable way to clothe your children when you're on a tight budget. And obviously they grow really fast too. Amelia, you've got a house full of children right now. Do you want to start?
One of whom's shoe has broken, so my partner's out trying to buy new children's shoes as an emergency. I think it's really important that we reflect on different people's needs. I think that there's an aspect in terms of the environment. I do try and make environmental choices with the work that I do and the things that I buy and all of those kind of the way that I travel. As soon as children are in the mix, that all goes completely to pot. You have single-use plastic at every moment, and it's a lot harder, as everyone who will know. And I think that when it comes to kids' clothes, then it is, as you said, they grow so quickly and it has such a big impact. But I don't think that that should, I think that when you look at the kind of aspects of what we've come to expect and the way that we've come to purchase things, I think that, you know, the kids actually do often reflect that kind of great hand-me-down culture and the way that we can kind of keep clothes going for much longer. Maybe not specifically with shoes in this case, but with other clothes, there are so many aspects that means that people do get support to have clothes. There have been shops, when my nephews were growing up, they used to go to a shop where they would take their clothes in, they'd get given vouchers, and then they'd be able to buy other clothes with the vouchers that were other secondhand clothes. So I think that there are kind of aspects of where children's clothing showing a slightly different way of how you operate, just because there is a very different need to keep costs down. And I think it is important that we are talking about accessibility of sustainable clothes for everyone, which is why I really think that the kind of legislation is so vital and important. I've seen people interviewed outside Primark who are horrified about the impacts that a Primark t-shirt has on workers around the world, what it has on the environment. There's that phrase that there's no such thing as cheap clothes. Someone or something somewhere is paying for it. And people are horrified, but they need those clothes and aren't going to change their habits because it's about accessibility. And I think that the more that we're able to create a framework where it simply should not be the case that people are being exploited around the world, it simply shouldn't be the case that we are creating this environmental destruction, these carbon emissions. And things like people in the chat have been talking about a law of ecocide. If we can work on things like that on an international basis, that gives us more power and control. But then kind of going back to that, your own power on this, then we should be speaking out and working to make those systems possible. And I think a lot of that is also challenging consumerism as consumerism in its own right. It's not, the thing about the fashion industry is it's not just about putting the clothes on your back so you can go to work or you can go to school or you can do these kind of basic things. It's this industry is telling us every 6 months that we should be buying new clothes because it's suddenly the trend has changed. And so there's a much bigger question about growth for the sake of growth, consumerism for the sake of consumerism, what advertising does in terms of influencing our own habits. And so I think it's really important that we do also disconnect that difference between clothing and these kind of big mechanisms of consumerism and kind of fast fashion as well, that are having a wider influence on the way that we work and operate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've talked about this in another event as well, about the activism is sort of calling an attention to the bulk of the issue, the sort of umbrella of it. And then underneath that, there's sort of all these prongs almost holding up the umbrella that link to the root of the problem in various different ways. And not everyone can sort of attack each thread, but each of us can kind of put some attention towards at least one of those threads. Thank you for that, Amelia. The next question is from Giuseppe De Bella. Is there a site where we can find news about workers' fights in the fashion industry? Tansy, this one might be for you.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't really like there. I mean, there's lots of apps and stuff, and you know, and people can investigate and stuff. But I think it's important to put, like, not just to make this into a question for individual consumers. Like, I think we need to be very clear where the power behind the throne is in the fashion industry. And the fashion industry is the way that it is because of a corporate drive to profit. So rather than asking individual people, oh, why are you wearing like a jumper that has been stitched by child refugees in Turkey, and they have no idea that this has been happening, you know, the question has to be put to the brands. You know, I think we have to think a lot bigger than just individual shopping choices, because that is not going to fix the problems that we have. And so really the question really is, why is there anything being sold at the moment that is leading to the deforestation of the Amazon, that has been stitched in like highly dangerous factories, or has been stitched by child refugees? And you know, these are the kind of questions that we need to be looking at. and not just thinking about fashion as like as a question of sort of a personal choice, because as Amelia has spoken about, like that choice is not real for most people. Like it's an illusion for most people. The Tory austerity like means that like there's billions of pounds of household debt, and like a huge percentage of households in this country have no savings, and then the next percentile has less than £1,500 in savings for the entire household. So the illusion, it's an illusion of choice, and we need to be thinking about it systemically rather than just about questions of personal choice. And I will say, like I'm going to put into the chat, I wrote an op-ed about fashion and class, because I'm sure many people saw over the summer, like when Primark reopened, like lots of people started demonizing the people in those Primark queues. And so I wrote a piece in response to that, which I've put in. And let's be clear, like we need to build a movement to deal with these questions, and that movement needs to take everybody with it. Like it cannot be a movement of people wealthy enough to to spend £100 on socks or whatever. Like we need to bring the people who can only spend £2.99 on socks with us as well. And I think that's absolutely crucial. So I'll put the article in the chat in case anyone's interested.
Yeah, it's great. And your book as well is a great source for that, as well as there's one called Greenwashing, Why We Can't Buy Our Way to a Greener Future by Kiera Pierre-Louis, I think. It's another really good one that shows it's not up to the individual, it's up to the society as a whole. The next question is from Helen O'Sullivan. Well, the conversation around these social and environmental issues has been increasing and more people are aware than ever before, there is still a clear behavior paradox as very few actually engage in sustainable responsible consumption. I believe this may be down to a systemic reluctance to change the way that we've always done things. How do you think this could be addressed? Perhaps education embedded within the curriculum, things like that. Does anybody want to pick that one up? Amelia, and then Nisant.
I feel like it shouldn't be about choice, it should just be the way. As has been alluded to, we shouldn't have to educate people about all of these issues. It should just be the way that the best issue for people and the best product for people and the best product for the environment is just the product available. I think it's really incredible the amount of items that we end up in our hands as a result of need and necessity that are destroying so many lives in so many different ways, as well as impacting future generations, simply because we have enabled it to be the way. So yeah, we need to imagine that something better, I mean, we talk about better is possible, but I think, it really is possible. It really is important to imagine a better system where these things aren't just how we imagine the way to be, because there is a far better way. And I feel like we're getting closer to it than ever before.
Thanks, Amelia. Nisant, do you want to add?
Yeah, I think I agree to Amelia, because let's say there was a system like, let's say we had like this Corona earlier this year, there was a strict legislation, you can't come out of the house, you need to wear a mask. If you come out of the house without a mask, you get fined. Like, this system, every single person who came out of the house during the Corona around the world wore a mask, so I think it's that kind of emergency, the system, the government should probably create, if you were to buy something really toxic, you get fined. The brand needs to get pay hefty fines, or some kind of it's kind of a crime, when you think about it, when someone's leaving toxic dyes into the river and someone else consumes water from that, and it's not a direct crime, but it's still indirectly you're trying to kill someone. You see what I mean? Just for the profit sake of your company. So I think it has to become one single system, just everything else. The government is okay, let's say you had a coffee and you had a bad stomach because of that and you're ill, you probably can sue the coffee maker, saying that, hey, I'm not feeling well. But that's not the case with the fashion, because someone's drinking the polluted water. He doesn't know that he's being directly affected by that water, and that's why he's got something when he's 50 years old. You see what I mean? Yeah. And the government needs to kind of come out with this legislation where this is it. Anything beyond that is a crime. And I think it can quickly change the system, and that's probably, I think, the quickest way to do things.
Yeah. And it's almost like putting ecocide law, which we talk a lot about here in the UK, Polly Higgins' creation, by putting that law into power internationally, that would change all industries to have to be responsible for the type of pollution that they create.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. So the next question is from Rosie, who I believe is one of the co-chairs of our Young Green community. The speakers have really comprehensively stated how supply chain injustice is a result of a global capitalist system, one in which big brands and companies are in the business to create profit off the back of workers. To what extent does this suggest that the key problem is on the supply side rather than the demand side of the production network? And what individual consumer behavior, and that individual consumer behavior isn't really the problem, while the unregulated power of brands, manufacturers, and employees is. And what does this mean for us as activists who want to challenge that structural problem? This is a big question, but an important one. Some of the stuff we've touched on already. Does anybody want to add anything to that? Tan?
Yeah, I'll go for a bit. I mean, so there's, so yeah, I mean, I see fashion as, and the conditions in the fashion industry as the corporate drive for profit. And so within the fashion industry, there are two costs which fashion corporations have to drive down and down and down in order to maximize their profits. And the first one of these is labor, human labor. Because unless you are using slaves, and there are slaves in parts of the fashion supply chain, then you have to pay some kind of wage. And so this is, this is where we see corporations hopping from factory to factory, looking for, to knock a few cents off the price of each individual unit that they're getting made. And we see them also hopping from country to country, looking for the lowest labor costs. And the additional impact of that is that anything that would prevent those costs being driven down is objected to by the governments and the factory owners. So, for example, maternity leave, trade unions, holiday pay, sick pay, all of these things. So this is how we end up with 60 million workers in terrible conditions. The second thing that is where the costs have to be driven down and down and down is materials, and like Nishant has said, and this is where we get wastewater just being dumped into the river, or we have the air or the land treated as just like a free resource, or oil being treated like it's a finite resource. And all of this is done. And you have to remember, there are people, the buyers out there, who are given bonuses for driving these costs down and down and down. And the sole reason that this happens is so that at the end of the year, the shareholders have the maximum amount in their bank accounts. And this is the logic of capitalism. And it's the trap there is that even if you had a company who really wanted things to be different, they would be up against all the other companies who they are constantly competing with. So, Topshop is competing with Primark, and Primark is competing with Boohoo, and so on. And the same in the luxury sector. Chanel is competing with Louis Vuitton, and on and on. And so this is the logic of capitalism. And this is why, it's important, make the best decisions that we can as individuals, do that work, but also do the political work, get involved in the campaigns, workers' solidarity, and and defending the environmental defenders, and all this kind of work, and being part of the political process in this country. But also, ultimately, we have to look at systemic change, which we've talked about quite a bit, because we are captured in a system which is the logic of capitalism. And never has it been more clear than during COVID that this is a failed system, that we are not feeding all of the children in this country, that we're not taking care of the elderly, and so on and so forth, that people are being evicted, and and so on. So personal change, yes, political change, yes, but systemic change as well is absolutely crucial. But the good news is if we can fix the fashion industry, we can fix everything.
Amelia and Nisanth, do you want to add anything else? We're just running a little bit over time, so that'll probably be the last question if you wanted to add anything. Or you good? Thumbs up. I'll just ask one more question so we can sort of end on an activated note. What's one thing you would tell people gathered here today to do tomorrow to make better possible? And that can be a little p or big P, sort of supporting integration, collaboration, participatory democracy. Are there any groups or resources that you would recommend people follow up with? Tansy, do you want to go first?
I feel like I've said enough, but I think the Asia Floor Wage Foundation is doing some really interesting work. The Clean Clothes campaign, Labour Behind the Label, follow as many like trade unionists and workers' rights in the global south as possible.
Great, thank you. And just so everyone knows, Labour Behind the Label will be with us next week as the part of the follow-up for this event, as we sort of go from the sowing to the soil, back to the soil again to close the circle. Amelia, would you like to add anything?
Just this whole system is broken, and just to believe in something better and go on and demand something better, because we can't keep going on like this. We've exposed in so many different channels the inequalities and the destruction that this industry causes. And I think that we have a real duty to, obviously there are kind of many campaigns we can get involved in, show solidarity with workers around the world, just demand something more, because I think that I really believe in the power of people. I believe in the power of speaking out. And I think that as someone who works as a politician, people often look to their political leaders as the people that will create that better world, but it will only happen if everybody demands something better than before, because we all have a voice, and the more we speak out, the more power we have.
Thanks, Amelia. Nisanth, do you want to add?
Yeah, I think like the change, the help, the support, or like if someone wants to make an impact, it has to be like local. So people are like sending money to India because people need food here or something, but I'm sure there's so many people in UK who are like who need education or food. So I think it has to start like locally. You support like the people around you. I'm sure there are people in need of education or food, or something. So I think when you start doing it in a local way, when everyone starts doing that in the local way, the local community becomes strong, and in turn, like combined local community is what a global community is, you see?
Yeah.
So I think that's really important to start seeing a change, and also choices when it comes to a consumer point of view, making better choices, thoughtful choices. Do we really need this? Or, is there a better option? Like, we just have to look for things. It's not easily available now, but I think if people were to opt for better choices, it would become like an easy access in the due course of time.
Thanks, Nisanth. And just so folks know, we have sort of a bank of content that already exists. There's one piece that has Fibershed, which Nisanth has been sharing, the Fibershed UK, which is a sort of community-owned organization that's regionalized here in the UK, as well as Riverford, which is an employee-owned company, and Chelsea Green Publishing, which are employee-owned companies, just these alternatives to the capitalist system that we have that puts the power back into the hands of community and takes it away from the pinnacle of the hierarchy, so to speak. So Julie is going to share a link to the Green Living Room if you want to explore some of those things. And then next Wednesday at 6 p.m., we are going to have 2 trade unions in the fashion industry, one that's local here to the UK and one that's for international workers, as well as Safia Mini, who's an entrepreneur and an author and a spokesperson and campaigner for fair trade and ethical treatment of workers. And then Babs Behan from Bristol Cloth and Botanical Inks, who is part of the Fibershed in the Southwest, which is a local example of what Nisanth is doing in India. So we're going to bring those folks together to sort of close the conversation next week at 6 o'clock. And since you're already registered to this event, you'll automatically get the info for that event as well. But if you want to share it, Julie's just shared the link in the chat. So thank you everyone for coming who is a panelist. We really appreciate you taking the time. And thank you everyone who showed up to listen to this conversation as well. We'll be sure to send out a replay of the recording as well as links that were mentioned in the chat and in the conversation so that you can follow up on anything that you're interested in. So we wish you all a beautiful day and we will see you next week. Take care. Bye.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you. Bye.